Welcome. We're back with another episode of Coffee with April, and it's time for another subscription video. This time we have the subscription coffee for the month of October. And it's going to be a coffee that just arrived here in the roastery. It's brand new. It's a first time collaboration here in April with this farmer. And it's something truly special, and we're really excited to launch it. This is actually a single farmer project, which we're going to explain more in detail because it's not just that simple, but it's a single farmer project from Ethiopia. We've been looking for a single farmer product for a long time in Ethiopia, mainly because most of the coffees you buy are from cooperatives that is bought, basically coffee that is bought from different farmers, processed and then sold to an exporter, or the process station is owned by an exporter and that is then sent out, giving the purpose of traceability a very hard time. It's very difficult to understand where does your coffee come from. And if you can't understand where your coffee comes from, then you're also not able to understand how to make it better. That's been one of the biggest challenges we have with cooperative-based coffees. Nothing wrong with cooperatives in itself. They all have a role, they all have a function, but we here at April want to try to improve, we want to push our quality better. And to be able to do that, we need to first identify a farmer, and we need to identify a piece of land where that coffee grows, that we can go visit, see, explore, and try to understand how we can make that coffee progress over time together with the farmer. Again, we're not farmers, we're roasters, but we want to have an insight and traceability in what we do. In terms of Ethiopia, it's been a lot of changes recently. I think last year was the biggest change, where they actually went back to a system that they had traditionally, but then reverted away from, which is the fact that you now can buy directly from a farmer, cooperative, or exporter. In most cases in Ethiopia, this means that the majority of people are actually buying from a larger exporter that owns several different processing mills. So most of the importing coffee, even if it's a single farmer lot, comes from a bigger producer or exporter, more or less. And so does this specific coffee as well. The coffee that we have grows in the Guji region of Ethiopia, one of the most renowned regions and one of our favorite regions for a long time. It turns out we get a lot of very peachy, berry-like coffees here. They're not quite as citrusy as other parts of Ethiopia, but it has this beautiful flavor complexity and intensity that we're looking for in coffees. This specific coffee comes from a cooperative or producer called Mitad, which is actually relatively big. They own several different process stations around Ethiopia, and there's a lot of very famous roasteries that are buying through these guys as well. Basically meaning that they know what they're doing and we can validate the quality that comes from here. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity of actually initiating for the first time ever here in Europe a single farmer relationship with one of their specific plots of lands, more or less, or specific producers that they are working with. And what's interesting in Ethiopia, and what a lot of people may not know, is that as we know, most of the varietals are referred to as a native heirloom, right? Basically untraceable varietals. But then I'm sure some of you have seen basically a varietal name, which is basically a code, so a number-digit code. And the interesting thing here is that it's actually not the name of a variety, it's the name of a section where a specific amount of coffee trees grows. So when we say single farm in this case, this means that the coffee trees from this lot of coffee that you guys are going to try are basically coming from a specific tract part of land, which is picked by a specific person, right? Meaning it's basically a farm. But that's how they work with it. So this specific coffee, and I'm going to read this on the screen because I don't know this in my head, is actually a selection number 75227. And the Mitad production facilities basically have a few of those options where you can single out a plot of land and identify the farmers working there. And then these coffees are still processed at a larger mill, in this case called Hambela, where a lot of different lots are also processed. But what's interesting here is that we can actually go to Ethiopia, we can touch those trees because we know what they are, we know who picked them, we can trace them all the way down to where it's grown, which usually is really, really hard to do, and we think that's really exciting. And we got the opportunity of being the first ones in Europe to work with it, and we're launching it here for you guys this month, basically. Now, there's a twist to it here, because a lot of you guys know that we don't necessarily work too much with natural processed coffees, which is really true. There's a few exceptions, Geisha Village being one of them, that do exceptionally clean coffees. Now, does that mean we don't like natural processed coffees? Not necessarily. It means we don't like coffees that are not tasting clean. So when we have a coffee that actually has a clear note of ferment in it, we choose to pass, right? This coffee, however, is actually a beautiful example of how good a natural could be when it's done right, meaning it's just as clean as a washed processed coffee. But because of the process, you have these underlying fruitier characters, which adds another dimension to the coffee, which makes it really interesting, complex, and even tastier than the washed versions from the same process stations. Now, part of why we're buying this natural coffee is that this is the first time they're trying to export and single out this specific plot of land, and they decided to actually process the whole lot natural. So to be fair, it wasn't another option. But we're really happy with it. We wouldn't have bought it otherwise. And more importantly, this is the beginning of a long-term collaboration where we can go back next year, visiting them later in December, basically ordering both natural and wash processed coffee from the same plot of land in the future. So it gives us the opportunity to create a new collaboration, something to grow on, and gives us a range of very interesting coffees. Now, it's a very high-grown coffee up at 2,000 meters, which is very specific for Ethiopia, that we have really high altitudes, organic by default, beautifully wild, which gives us a really interesting flavor structure. Now, in terms of roasting, which becomes really interesting whenever you have a natural coffee. So there's a lot of different ideas. Should I be roasting an Ethiopian coffees longer, shorter, different time after crack, more energy in the beginning, low energy in the beginning? What we're doing here is that we're stretching out the roast, working with a slightly lower initial burner setting. Then when we're going in just before Maillard, basically meaning when the coffee is starting to add color, we're adding an additional amount of burner to give that extra momentum going through the processes. That way, we can actually extend the total roast time, but make sure we have sufficient amount of energy going through Maillard caramelization, making this really sweet, flavor intense, and transparent all the way. Now, the time after crack here is roughly 1 minute, and we're ending at a end temperature of about 208, which again is within a normal range of what we do in terms of our filters, making this coffee again really transparent, balanced, and super easy for you guys to brew, which is really interesting as well. Now, as with all of our coffees, we recommend to wait a bit of time after roast to actually try it. We usually say about 7 days. I'm gonna argue with this natural coffees, or sometimes natural coffees in general, just give them a bit more time. If you add up to 14 days after, you're gonna see they actually become cleaner. The flavor intensifies, the positive flavor notes intensifies, making your coffees a lot more vibrant and a lot more interesting as well. So I'm gonna recommend to give you a bit of extra time before you open this bag to really kind of maximize the quality of what you get out of it. In terms of brewing, we're exploring different brewing approaches now, testing a lot of different brewers versus our own April brewer, which we're getting ready to launch the third version of. And that's really exciting, and you know that we're a fan of flatbed brewers. We've always been. In this case, we're actually pushing this coffee on a Kalita, the classic, bigger version of it. We're doing a very simple brew. We like doing simple stuff, easy to replicate, great results, really efficient way to brew as well, which is really interesting. So what we're doing here and what we recommend using is basically a 14-gram dose to 210 grams of water, which is basically a 1:15 ratio. Again, we kind of get stuck with that these days, but it gives really beautiful results at the moment and seem to fit our roasting very well. We're starting with 14 grams. We're gonna pour a total of 70 grams in 3 different steps. So 70, 70, 70, more or less. Very straightforward, very simple, easy to remember, creates a really tasty result. 60 grams of those 70s are gonna mean a circle pour, where we're gonna finish off that continuous pour with 10 grams center pour, just to make sure you're gonna hit that 70 perfectly. We want you to pour those 70 grams in roughly 10 seconds. You're gonna let that sit for about 30 seconds, pour another 70 grams of water again in 10 seconds, and then you're gonna make the last pour at about 120. Again, 70 grams in 10 seconds. You're gonna end up with a total brew time of about 220, 230 if you do this right. We recommend pushing the water temperature at about 93 degrees Celsius, slightly higher than what we had before to really emphasize sweetness and get a bit more flavor clarity in the final cup as well. So overall, we're super excited to bring this coffee. Again, it's a fully traceable coffee all the way down to the roots from Ethiopia, which we don't see every day, and we couldn't be more excited to push it to you. So while you see this video, the coffee's already on the way. So I hope you really enjoy it when it arrives. And again, give it a bit more time before start brewing it. That's really gonna emphasize the quality of this coffee. As always, thank you guys for watching. We're really happy you do. And if you have any comments or thoughts, just please write them down here. Thank you.